everybody. Welcome to the Montessori Show July 2022 edition. And Simone and I asked all of you what you wanted us to talk about this one. And it was voted that we were going to talk about the mathematical mind. So welcome, everybody, and good to see you, Simone.
Yeah, lovely to see you all as well. Lovely to see you, Jeanne-Marie. I'm always happy to do these now quarterly Montessori shows, so at least we always get to catch up as well. It's great. Exactly. And the mathematical mind is something we haven't talked about much, so I'm really excited. And Jeanne-Marie, you're going to kick us off with an introduction, and then we've got some questions that have come in before. But also, if you have questions about something that Jeanne-Marie is saying, feel free to drop it in the chat. And then if we cover all the questions about the mathematical mind, then we'll move into some of the other topics that we have questions that have come in, as well as anything that you have on your mind tonight.
Wonderful, wonderful. And yes, please always tell us where you're joining us from as well, because I always love to see how international this wonderful community is.
Jeanne-Marie, would you like to do the land acknowledgement today?
I'm not very good at this, but I know that I live.
That's where you need to practice, right? Just like
I live on the land of the Kumeyaay Indians, and I am grateful for them and the ancestors and such. And I am in Southern California, in San Diego.
Thanks, Jeanne-Marie. And if you don't know the land that you're calling in from, you can look it up. I'll put a link into the chat for you.
Yes, and I actually was on a call. Sorry, we're going off topic, but I was on a call yesterday with Planned Parenthood because of what's going on in the US. And there was a land acknowledgement, and I realized that there were a lot of parts of the world where there was no territories, which I found interesting because I know that there needs to be, you know, it's worldwide. There's all sorts of, you know, people that have been there for so long. So it was interesting how it wasn't yet complete. So I think we're all working on that. But let us get back to the Montessori show and the mathematical mind. And so for me, I suggested this topic because it fascinates me how the child's brain, the newborn brain, the human brain, is really how would you say, a place of potential, such as language, such as mathematics, and so the mathematical mind is the human mind that is geared towards precision, exactness, order, and it is a tool of the human tendencies of helping us orient ourselves and such. And so the mathematical mind starts at birth, right? It is this mind needing to have order, to understand its surrounding and exactness and such. But here I'm going to just talk what I know from my own training of the 3 to 6, because Simone will talk more about it, but in the birth to 3, it wasn't as, you know, important. Like I have my album here with me. It's a big album. There's a big part of the Montessori curriculum in the 3 to 6 around mathematics. And it first starts with the sensorial experience of exactness, of precision and such. And that is in the actual Montessori material itself, that is always mathematically precise, whether we are giving mathematical language to it and such. But from the very beginning, the manipulatives that the child is working with, such as the pink tower, the red rods, the binomial cube, all of that, those are material that is found in the sensorial area. And they explore all of those before we even introduce any mathematical material. And one of the first mathematical material that we present in the primary classroom is called the number rods. And the number rods is the exact replication of the red rods that the child has been manipulating and working with and setting out in gradations of order and such. So they are already understanding length. And again, this is mathematically precise. The red rods are centimeters, 10 centimeters, all the way to a meter. And the child is able to put them visually in a gradation. When we see that, when we observe that they have kind of mastered this visual sense, then we introduce the number rods. And the number rods are exactly the same size. The only difference is that they are red and blue. Because, for example, the first one, and I forget if it's blue or red, but the first one is just the number 1 because it only has one color on it. Then blue, yeah, I want to look at my album, but I'm not going to distract myself. It's fine. And then the 2 is blue and red. And there we are helping the child understand the concept that numbers have their own unique personality in a sense, right? That they have their own entity. And again, this whole concept of the helping them understand mathematics is always done first very sensorially, because, for example, we have what we call the spindle box, which is to help them understand the concept of 0. But before that, they are holding in their hands different quantities of spindles, and it is the sensorial feel of what it feels like to only have 1 or to have 8 in the hand, right? So they're understanding quantities and really experiencing sensorily quantities before we even introduce the symbols. And so that is, to me, a real difference in how maybe more traditional math education is going to be, where it's about, these symbols and memorizing symbols, but the child isn't really getting the concept of what these symbols represent. And so for me, that is the beauty with the Montessori, is that we're really experiencing it in our bodies first, right? We're experiencing it with our senses before we associate the symbol to it. And it's, a beautiful progression of going from just understanding 1 through 10, understanding 0, but then through all of the experience, we're understanding the decimal system. We are working with large quantities right from the beginning, because children are fascinated, and it's so much more exciting to say, 7,554 than just 2 or 3. So we give them that joy and that curiosity, and we carry large numbers. So again, it's sensorial, but we're taking the child from very concrete through all the way to abstraction, where when the child leaves the primary classroom, most often they are computing in their mind. They no longer need the manipulatives and the concrete material that we had at the beginning. So it's a beautiful progression of the senses taking us through this, being able to abstract with our mathematical mind that we all have. I mean, we all, needed to figure out what time the show was going to start and how much time we had to get our cup of tea, and all of that is our mathematical mind. So the child is born with a mathematical mind, and it is for us to give them, precise language, precise quantities, to let them experience, math with their senses. So I hope that all makes sense. And Simone, I know, wanted to kind of interject how that is with, the newborn through 3, and also the older children. So.
Yeah, so it's actually like a human tendency to exact and all those kind of things. So it's from birth, there is actually still a mathematical mind. So when a baby is lying under a mobile on their little movement mat and they make a connection and they hit and strike the mobile, they've actually managed to, at first it's an accident and then they repeat it, right? And so they're starting to get more precise and get exact. And then I don't know if you've ever seen a baby who's learned to roll. We had like one roller in our class and they'd be able to line themselves up to get to the toy they wanted from across the room. And like, I kind of think that was the mathematical mind at work, because how am I going to reach that object would be for like a crawling or a reaching baby. And then that rolling, it was really accurate.
That's
and
funny. That was actually my son. He would roll from one end of the room to the other. And it's true. It's like, you have to calculate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's already at work, even in a baby's mind, the mathematical mind. And then as a toddler, it starts to come up, just I use it all the time in a very natural way. So I'm unpacking the shopping and like, oh, there's one orange, there's two oranges, there's three oranges. How many times do I need to go upstairs here in Amsterdam? And I'm counting, oh, there's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so I'm using it in a very natural way. But we also have that one-to-one correspondence that they learn in the toddler age group. So that's something that they're going to need to know. Like basically you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But that is like, your numbers, but you're not actually counting anything. It's when you know that this finger is 1 and this is 2 and this is 3. So lots of practice at one-to-one correspondence will help that matching. But you can do things like when you're setting the table, for example, you have one placemat for one person, 2 placemats for 2 people, and you're placing it down so that every person has a placemat. So that's the first time I kind of really think of one-to-one correspondence is when we're setting a table and you're matching the person to that kind of thing. So there are some really quick examples that came to mind for the baby and toddler age group. And then in the preschooler one, there's so many beautiful Montessori math materials, and we wouldn't have them at home. I don't like at all, but it is wonderful to see how concretely you can learn these things, because for example, the idea of odd and even is such an abstract concept to our minds. And for some children, they don't get that for a long time. But in the Montessori math material, it is indirect preparation for odd and even when you have these, what they call red counters. And so you put the red counters, and if it's 1, it's in, it has 1. If it has 2, then it's in a pair. When you make 3, you make the top 2 as a pair, and then there's 1 left over, which shows the odd number. And it's just so clever in how it all builds on its scaffold.
And the follow-up on that beautiful odd and even is that when you have them lined up, so that the even one are 2, right, as you say, and we use our finger and we push through so that single one actually moves up, and then they actually are able to see all of the even, all of the odd, which is fabulous. Like it's just so simple, but yes, fabulous.
Just amazing. So many concrete materials. Like Jeanne-Marie said, I love how like these 5-year-olds go and they can concretely do a mathematical sum of 7,000, for example, plus another 1,000, because there is a block that is of 1,000 here, and then they go and get another block that's 1,000, and they go, oh, there's 8,000. It's not done in this abstract way where you have to write it down on a piece of paper. It doesn't make any sense. And when then they learn to carry the 1 is actually because there's 1 too many 10s now, so it goes into another column. So I just love it, so practical. And then, as you say, they won't need that. So particularly from 6 to 12 years old, then they become the second plane child, they will start to, as Jeanne-Marie says, not need the concrete material so much and move into the abstract. But what's even more beautiful about the 6 to 12 maths kind of part is that instead of giving children formulas, which you won't learn, they actually learn to recognize patterns, and then they go, oh, I'm going to make my own formula so that next time this happens, I'll know how to create it. So for example, my son said, oh, I'm learning how to, the formula for the circumference of a circle. And I said, oh, I know that, it's pi d, wanting to share how wise I was. And he didn't even know what I was talking about. He goes, well, actually, I'm still working it out. But what I'm doing is I'm getting a string and I'm measuring the circumference of the circle. And when I divide it by the diameter, I come out to this number 3.144. Every time I come out with this number, 3.14 something. And I was like, he's discovered pi. And I mean, so then you'll be able to write that pi, 3.14 times the diameter equals the circumference. And they've managed to work out the formula for themselves. So it's nothing about rote learning. It's actually about, understanding these principles from scratch, which I think is such a beautiful, beautiful approach. And then what's interesting is if you go look at mathematics for adolescents, they actually want to see how to put that into practice. So everything they've learned up to 12 years old, if they worked on it, if they go and did an Erdkinder program, for example, where they go and live on a farm, they don't sit there and do maths, you know, lecture. They do have seminars about maths, but they would be calculating how much volume of concrete they need for the new pigsty, you know, and so they're actually putting it into practice and seeing the practical application, because that's what a teenager needs. Theoretical stuff isn't so interesting. They need to know how it goes into practice.
Right.
One thing I have to correct myself on is not at all blue, it's red. The first one is red.
Okay.
Blue, red, yeah.
Okay.
And it's always red and then blue and then, yeah, blue, red. It's really lovely.
And to me, the beauty, like even when you talk about the older children, is that we are really simply nurturing what is already there, right? That we have to remember that it is a potential. And it saddens me sometimes to, you know, how people will say, oh, I'm not good in math or such. It's just, for me, it's not, you know, being good or not good. It's just, we have different interests, and we you know, some of us are word people, writers, some of us are creative, some of us are mathematicians, but we all have a mathematical mind. We all need to calculate the distance, you know, to get somewhere, or, you know, what time we need to leave so we won't be late, and things like that. So our mathematical mind is always going. But for the child, it's this beauty of wanting precision, needing order, and always kind of seeking that precision. And that the Montessori material and the curriculum has really understood that mind, and is able to you know, have this material. And a lot of the math material, from what I understand, was created with Maria Montessori and her son Mario. That's where most of it was created, the two of them together, and it is gorgeous. I love that area of the classroom for sure.
I just wanted to ask people who are on the call, is this clear for you all? Is it new to you? Pop in the chat so that we can kind of hear from you and what kind of questions come up for you. And while you do that, there's a question that came in before the call from Anna, who asked how to support the mathematical mind for the 3 to 6 year old, what to do at home if the child is in a Montessori school.
So what I like to encourage at home is to have mathematical language, right? Just like what Simone was saying about, you know, with the toddlers is you know, for example, like cooking together, having to measure things, having to say, oh, well, you know, we need to do a double batch because we have, you know, a lot of people coming over, like how much. So asking those questions of how much, looking at the material that we already have in the home to measure, to weigh, and all of that, but also to have those to have those questions, and to invite them to be thinking about, you know, oh, the entire family is here tonight. How many people, how many, you know, how many plates do we need? How many forks do we need? And helping them count it and have that sensorial experience as well. And again, it is not about, you know, I know some parents will tell me, oh, my child, you know, knows how to count to 100. That's wonderful. But I want more the encouragement of understanding what is 100. So sometimes even at the park, counting rocks, holding 8 rocks in one hand, holding 1 rocks, putting them together. How many rocks is that? Just having fun with the experience of numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. I also find that it's so interesting that how children who are in a Montessori school have this very concrete understanding. They work with numbers in many different ways. They'll do 0 to 100 as like a long number chain and write it down. They'll make it in as like a hundreds board. There's lots of different ways that they work with numbers. And then like, I remember being at the bus stop and I was looking at the bus timetable. I'm like, okay, our bus time's at this, and it's now this. And then like my kids went, oh, that's about 8 minutes. And I'm like, it just automatically happens for them. It falls into place that they know, you know, it was 15 less 7 and something. And like, how do they calculate that? They've never done, you know, subtraction officially, but it's just a very natural way that they understand these, and they've felt the concrete difference between big, small, seeing a little golden bead that's 1, and then a strand that's 10, and then 10 strands is 100, and then 10 of the hundreds on top of each other is 1,000. It's a really concrete way to see what the difference is.
Right. And I would also say, like, if you have a child that is fascinated with numbers and such, to let them be, because I remember being in the classroom. I was new in the classroom, and I had this 5-year-old who was just fascinated with numbers. And it was one of the presentations where there were strips of number, and he was writing the numbers. I think it was the skip counting, if you know that beautiful cabinet with all the chains hanging, that is skip counting. So we learned to count by 3s, by 4s, by 5s. And every day he would repeat the same, presentation and papers. And I asked my mentor at the time, I said, this child, that's all he wants to do. Shouldn't I get him into, reading and whatever? No. Let them, because this is a time right now where this is what he wants to master. This is what he's fascinated. And sure enough, a few days later, he moved on to something else, and that was it. So I just say, observe and let them go through that curiosity about numbers. And they're going to ask you, what is this number? What is this? How much is this? Please, give it to them, let them experience it.
Yeah, I love that. I just put an image of the bead cabinet in the chat so that people can.
Oh, good. Yes.
But it's very hard to describe what we're talking about unless
I know. And I have my album, but we need to do a visual presentation of all this, because it is really very ingenious material. I know that through my training, I fell in love with mathematics again. Like I've always liked mathematics. I love geometry and everything, but I was one of those that, I'm not good in math or whatever, but I completely fell in love with math, and so much of it just made sense touching it and working with all the material. So
yeah, and I know many people who didn't like math or didn't understand it, who did their Montessori training and then went, oh, if only I'd learned this way, I would have understood what that was all about.
And one thing I'm going to say also is that one of the sensorial material that I was talking about, this binomial cube or trinomial cube. So that's the name of the material, and it is basically a 3-dimensional puzzle that fits into a box. And so for the 3 to 6-year-olds, that is all it is. It is a puzzle that we show them how to do, that it has a control of error, meaning that if you don't do it properly, the box doesn't close. So they just try it over and over again. But the fascinating thing is that later on in elementary, that same puzzle is going to help them understand formulas. So the formula for the binomial and the trinomial. And I remember in my training, there was a woman who had actually been a Montessori child. So she had had access to all this material as a child. And for her, the trinomial and the binomial was actually like an image imprinted on her brain, right? That's what she said. Like, it's like when I think of the formula, it's that puzzle. So to me, it's just fascinating how just manipulating these little cubes that are mathematically precise, then later on, it just makes total sense in our mind, and it is a formula. So it's fascinating.
I love that. And
Yes.
Maya says, children who are exposed to Montessori materials are not afraid of numbers, are enjoying in exploring them because of the concrete experience, because they understand the relation between the symbol and the quantity. Both my daughters love math thanks to this, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yes. Yes, very true. Very true.
Maria sent me a question in the chat that says, how can we help our third grader with multiplication? He had Montessori education for Casa, but now is in normal school, and I find it's hard for him to incorporate the concepts. And also then how do we keep math fun at this age?
So I love the finger charts, which is how we do multiplication in the 3 to 6. So as a third grader, I wouldn't know, you know, for the elementary, if that would be something that would be of interest. But there would be that. And then the other idea is just really through memorization, but through using a 3-period lesson, really about maybe matching up, you know, equations with numbers. But yeah, that's a good question that I'm not an elementary person, so that would be hard. I know Pilar from Mainly Montessori has a lot of good resources around math for the second plane child, especially if they have been in Montessori, but they you know, didn't quite get it at the time, or didn't master all those multiplication tables. Because that's the fascinating thing, like with that boy that I was talking about, who just was fascinated with skip counting. When we got to the multiplication boards, he was like, oh yeah, I know those. And it was already imprinted in his mind, like he had already memorized them all just from playing with the skip counting chains. So
yeah.
Do you have resources for that for the third grader, Simone, and multiplication?
Not specifically, no, not specifically a material. But I think that yeah, keeping maths fun is things that Jeanne-Marie was talking about, like baking with kids is fun, you know, hopscotch, you know, making a huge hopscotch that goes up to 100 is fun, you know, if there's just learning to recognize numbers. And you know, even young children, once they start to realize the pattern, like I would go 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, then you go 30. And you know, so you can just play games all the time as you're kind of using numbers in your daily life. I don't take anything too seriously, because if it's serious, then it's no fun. Like if I have to do anything, so I just use it in a very relaxed and fun way. I think board games are also great at, you know, taking turns. Things like Yahtzee, for example, is really great because they're having to work out, this is a pair, and then I need a 2 and a 3, you know, to make a full house. So those kind of things, they're not going to think, oh, this is maths, but you know, they're starting to get just more comfortable. There's even an animal version. I'm not sure if it's still around, but it used to be called Animal Yahtzee. And so then you have like 5 elephants. And so for a child who's really resistant to numbers, that would be an even like easier way. But Monopoly, you know, they're learning about counting out change and things like that. So they can get more and more practice with those as well.
So Julian wants to ask a question live. Yes, please unmute yourself. You can even put the camera on if you wish and ask us your questions. Please do.
Hey, hello. Hello, I'm so happy that actually a number of Lithuanians also joined, because I really wanted people to hear you live. And yeah, for me, everything you're talking about is very nice, because now I'm just doing a little course on math 3 to 6.
Oh, good.
And even though she's like 2 years and 8 months or something like that, she is now very much into the letters and the numbers. But the problem is that she goes to a regular kindergarten, my daughter, and they're kind of teaching that. Sorry for the noise, because I'm in the coffee shop, so trying to have a peaceful time. So they're learning numbers sort of like the regular way, and there is a lot of mess in her head. That's what I observe, because she's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. I said it's not 8, it's 5. And now I think next week I'm just trying to come with the start with the preparatory materials and then go to the math. So what to do so that, you know, kind of like, you know, she will be going to that kindergarten because this is something which is the most convenient now. It's next to the house and I cannot just commute across the city and blah, blah, blah. And so how to make sure that I teach her at home and these things do not interact. The second question, like, you understand what I mean?
Yes.
So the second question is that we kind of I can't get all the materials. So apparently we don't have the pink cube. We just have some card box, but that could also work. It's can be like alternative. Definitely I won't have the red, the brown steps. And the only material I have those spindles which already have this blue, red, unless I maybe make something up, but everything takes so much time. And by the time I make it, she's no longer interested. So yeah, and then I'll probably try with spindles and try to with them matching, like this is one to one with maybe some coins or something like that. So the question is, so how to get through with the fact that at school, at the kindergarten, they're learning these things different way. And she's a little bit the same thing, not only with math, but with the language, because I really adore the way they learn language the Montessorian way, and I'm just waiting for those sandpaper letters because it took me ages to make them myself. So I said, okay, that's one thing I could invest. So how to match those two things? And then what if I don't have the, you know, all these three materials like stairs, pink cube, and the rods which are not, you know, they. So can I go with that, or like?
So I will say, and I'm sure Simone has, I do not feel that you absolutely have to have Montessori material at home. There is plenty of things that you already have in your home that are similar, right? I feel that you spending so much time and energy trying to make it all is kind of taking away from just experiencing things with her, right? So for me, there's that. So I just want to take the pressure off of you that you have to have it all. There's, you know, just with blogs and other things. So yes, it's not going to be, you know, the precise material that we have in the classroom, but you know, she's not in a Montessori classroom, and this is your home. So you can definitely give her the love of language and mathematics with what you already have, right? So for one thing, you started out with saying, you know, how she's counting and she's skipping. That is perfectly normal. We've all done it. I wouldn't necessarily correct her and go, oh no, just let her go through it, but try to give her the experience of giving you a number. So maybe when we set the table, is like, can you get me 3 forks? Can you get me 5 spoons? So that there's this, right, there's this understanding of what 5 really means, and that we can hold the 5 spoons in our hands. So that's where I would do more of that work, is with the sensorial experience of what is quantities. And then, you know, being careful that it's true that she is, you know, in a traditional setting, so she's learning language differently and such, but don't like put so much pressure on yourself that you're you know, that you're missing out, or that you have to get material and all this, because sometimes that can also confuse them if there's like too many different ways of learning. So definitely complement with things. And if you've already invested in the sandpaper letters, I think that's wonderful, and you can help her there. But we also need to be careful because you know, the sandpaper letters for me are in cursive, are lowercase cursive. And oftentimes in traditional settings, we're teaching the children in print letters. So things like that can be a little confusing. I hope that that makes sense. And Simone, what do you want to add to that?
I would agree that I always worry about, even if the child's going to a Montessori school, us doing supplementary things at home, because there can be some confusion. And the only time I do it is like, for example, when someone said, my child's having trouble with the multiplication bit, is there a material perhaps that's hands-on concrete that they could practice with? Then I might just like try that. But if it, sometimes Montessori materials are coming from building scaffolding steps all the low way along, they're taking one material out just doesn't kind of make sense. So I guess the purpose of this call is more to understand our child's mind is mathematical. There's so many things in our daily life that we can introduce them to just in their ordinary play and how we relate to each other, and talking about time and when's their birthday, that's based on a calendar, and turning the calendar over every day. You know, there's for most of the people on the call who aren't in elementary or anything, that's probably going to be enough, because then they can just get on and do schoolwork at school, and then they just have so much time for play and practical life and being outdoors, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also to say that if you do end up making your own DIY materials, Jeanne-Marie was talking to me before the call started about how precise we have to be, because really, like a pink towel, for example, and I don't think anyone wants to make this, is like, it really has to be precisely like 1 here and 10 is the biggest, and they have to be very accurate for them to have the exact relationship. And I think that would be very time consuming.
Yeah, it is mathematically precise. Like the red rods, for example, that I was talking about, that big one is a meter, so that sensorially you know what a meter is. You can visualize, you can feel it, and you know, you can know your space around. But so if you have, you know, that it's not really a meter, then you'll never know what a real meter is. So we have to be careful in the quality of the material that we give to the children if we are you know, if we are investing in having material at home. But, you know, like Simone says, I am really a big advocate of Montessori material, classroom material, if your child is in a Montessori classroom, or if your child is going to school. So this is not for homeschoolers, but those who are in a different, that belongs there. It doesn't belong at home. Like I don't, you know, I remember having parents, you know, who absolutely wanted to have material at home. And I was like, no, please don't, because then the child won't want to come here, won't be excited about the material that is in the classroom because they already have it at home. So why bother? So for me, it's really, I would rather that you invest in fun board games, like Simone was saying, where we have numbers where you go to the store and you weigh things, and you think about recipes, how many apples and oranges do you need, things like that, so that there's that mathematical language, than to actually, you know, have the material at home. Does that help?
Yeah. I also have a little bit like a personal question, because I'm kind of pondering upon that, because now with the regular school, whatever they were learning, not even being 3, she already recognizes all the letters, like even small, not only capital, which I'm really fascinated, because I haven't went to the letters yet. I mean, I read her a lot, but I never taught her letters, so I'm very fascinated. And then when I went to that Montessori school, apparently in the group 3 to 6, that's where they start. They don't have the baby group. They don't have that 0 to they don't have that 1 to 3. And then they said, well, we just practice, we'll just concentrate a lot on practical materials, and we mainly do letters and math only when they are around 5. And I know that by that, like in more like a preschool, like now for like, expect that for the next 2 years we're mainly concentrated on practical activities. And because we were doing those activities, even though it was not about the precisement, just doing practical activities, when she has this very active mind now, she's just like hungry for letters and hungry for numbers, she would be just bored. And that's one of the reasons when I'm a little bit like, maybe better go with this one, with the regular, because she was doing lots of things which are very new to the other kids, because some kids at 3, they even come, some of them, they even come that they can't do any self-care over the diapers. So she'll kind of can, even though the school is very nice and the kids get prepared, for her, I'm a little bit worried that she'll be a little bit like, so where is all that exploratory? Because now they, with the school, even though it's regular, they do a lot of the exploration. They go how to make bread, and they go up to observe like animals, and like they do these outings regularly, which also is a big part of like hands-on learning. So I'm kind of like, what to do? So this is one question. And second, even though it's not mathematical mind, but maybe you could comment a little bit more how to not having that one person, one language, how to, because I know that for many Lithuanian moms also that might be interesting. And maybe at the end, if you have time, how to teach a foreign language screen free if it's just like one parent who is trying to invest himself in languages, and there is no other person and trying to avoid the screens, what to do? So that's it from me.
Okay, so there's two very, very important questions, very important topics. So the one about the different schools, the Montessori school, the traditional school, from the way that you described the so-called Montessori school, who's telling you that there's, you know, no letters before 5, to me, that's a red flag right there. So I wouldn't, that's not that are observing and following the child, because in my 3 to 6 classroom, I had 2.5-year-olds that were doing sandpaper letters, right? It's you follow the child. Each child is different and you follow them. Some didn't start until they were 3.5 or 4, and others, you know, 2.5. So for me, it's really about the individual child. It's not about, you know, the adult deciding what time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, she said like it won't be like for another year or something. Like we first do a lot of practical activities to get the hand prepared, but it's a good school, but like because I was doing that from nearly the baby, I mean, so I'm a little bit worried that she will be a little bit bored and behind, and there will be like, she will be like stuck.
So that was my next point, is that you know your child better than anybody else. So it's the environment, it's where she is thriving, it's where you feel that she is feeling good, is where she belongs. Whether it's traditional, you know, and they're exploring, they're making bread, I think that sounds wonderful to me. Then a school where it is Montessori, but you feel that she's going to be bored and at a loss. So that is, you know, I'm not there to know which one is best, but I think you have to really ask your heart of, and you know your child better than anybody. You know, you've observed both places, you know where she will thrive most. So that would be that. The other thing about bilingual education, we will link up a show that we did specifically on bilingual education. But for me, it is about consistency. It is about the person who speaks a native language, share that with the child. And when they are alone with the child, that is the only language that they speak. When they are with the other adults that speaks different languages, then we have a common language. But if you have a language that you want to transmit to your child, you need consistency and make sure that that is the only language that you speak. She will pick up the language of the community completely on her own. Their mind is incredible. So Simone, what do you have to add to that?
Well, Andrea had also sent in a question about how to choose a school when Montessori is not an option. So I think you touched on it a little bit. And I really
well, hello, everyone. This is Jeanne-Marie Pinel speaking to you from Santiago.
That's a bit of a, sorry about that. I was opening up the language and multilingualism. Thing in the background. I'll pop that link for those folks on the call in the chat. This is the call on multilingualism. I'll shut that tab down before I open. What's going on here? But yeah, Andrea was saying that she also was wondering what to look for in a school. And I always go with like, what looks like a warm school. They enjoy learning, they're working with their hands, you know. I'd rather a cozy school if my child's more, you know, takes a little longer to warm up to people than a big, you know, school. Some Montessori schools you might walk into, if there is a Montessori school, and you just get this feeling that they're very strict and they're cold and they're this kind of thing, and that might not work for your family. So just like look for, sometimes you might get clues walking into a place that says they're Montessori, but it doesn't look like a Montessori classroom that you've seen in the photos, you know. And that doesn't mean that every classroom should look the same, because they should be culturally relevant, you know, responding to where they are in the world. But there's certain things like materials that should be complete on the shelf and that they're looked after with care and the environment looks attractive. And so I'd be looking for those kind of things in a Montessori, in any school. Do you walk in and it looks cozy, or does it feel chaotic? You know, because your child is absorbing that, particularly in this first plane of development. They're picking up.
And another thing that I would encourage you to do, those of you who are, you know, looking for a school, whether it's Montessori or not, is to be able to take time to observe. If you can, you know, to spend 15-20 minutes to just observe how the children are being talked to, how they are being respected, how they're being given directions. You will feel it. You, like I say, you know in your parenting heart, you know where your child will thrive most, right? I remember when we first moved to this country, I had to find a daycare for my daughter, and I visited a few. I ended up choosing this tiny little house because the woman was, it was a little messy, but she was just so warm and so loving, and I could tell that the children just adored her, as opposed to, you know, the big house that had the big playground and all this. But the human, it's the humanness of it that you also need to pay attention. So and like Simone says, you know, there's some schools that say that they are Montessori, and even schools that are accredited Montessori, if the humans in those classrooms don't appeal to you, and you know that they're not going to appeal to your child, then that's a red flag right there. So follow your heart, really is the most important.
Okay, I think we should do some like more quick fire ones, because we're getting through so many questions. But Nisha said, totally agree with that warmth from a school and or teacher. It's tough when they're in elementary and they move up from one class where the teacher's warm and welcoming to one with a cold, strict teacher. Sorry, my Montessori heart hurts sometimes. And Jamuna said, thank you. And Sarah says, I want to second what Simone and Jeanne-Marie are saying. We've previously sent our two sons to a non-certified Montessori school, but I had certified teachers, but it was an amazing school, and the teachers were warm and inviting. Most had worked there for 10 years or more. Yeah, seeing when they've worked there for a long time, that also means they're happy. It's a really good sign. And the turnover was very low. It was like a family. All of the children and parents felt welcome there. They were also one of the only location schools serving hot food and had vegetarian options. It was a great fit. But I want to go back up to Nisha's question. My 6.5-year-old is in math remedial now. In her last report at school, they said, she says, I'm bad at math. She has a lot of trouble knowing which two numbers equal what under 10. So if I say put up 7 fingers, she has to count in ones until she has them up, rather than just putting up 5 and 2. She wasn't exposed to Montessori, unfortunately, but I have to admit I'm worried, as our education system is very fast and competitive. They've just introduced multiplication by making sets of, just heard what you said about Pilar, will check her out. Okay, so Nisha, I think that, yeah, Pilar will be a great help, but also, like, rather than testing our children, that can also make them feel worse. So actually build up where they're at. If they're counting with their fingers, let's just build up with fingers. I've got 2 on this hand and I've got 5 on this hand, let's count them. You know, so you can do it that way, rather than saying, where's 7 and she has to get it wrong. Then you actually working with them, keep scaffolding, keep giving the lesson, to stay with the first period like this for a long time. And then you're playing games. That's kind of what my initial reaction to that as well.
Yes, definitely. And then playing, you know, playing those board games, inviting them to have conversations about how much things we need on the table, and maybe even, you know, adding up those forks and those spoons and then counting how many it is. So it's really about us having more of a playful mindset around the mathematical language. And like Simone says, it's not testing them. It's just, we want to nurture that interest and that love of mathematics.
Yeah. Nisha, Dominoes is great. That would be a great start.
Wonderful one, yes. And I did put the link of Pilar's timeline, but we'll also have it in the replay email for you.
Amanda had a question in the chat. My homeschooled 8-year-old is behind in math, and I have some Montessori materials, but it's been hard now just having my 5th child. I imagine that would be. But my question is to introduce concepts with materials in a 3 to 6 way or in an elementary way. I feel like I should introduce in the more 3 to 6 way first. Thoughts, suggestions, thanks. And I would totally go with that as well. Like start with concrete and then move to abstract, and you'll move through it really fast if that helps. But again, we're confusing. It is a homeschool 8-year-old, so yeah, I guess you probably have flexibility to do it in a more Montessori way, and
Right.
will help a lot.
And it's going to depend on the child too, right? If we're using kind of 3 to 6 material, they might like feel that it's silly and not stimulating enough. So you kind of have to gauge, but definitely, go back to the basics and it will work through itself rather quickly. Hopefully, but yeah, it's about sometimes just going back to the basics and having more. And at one point when we are kind of in the second plane, we do need to just memorize and really go through that gymnastic of memorization, because we've lost that sensitive period of the sensorial and the manipulative. So here we're just helping them with getting it in that mental gymnastics.
Yeah. And so I think we've covered these questions already, because Caitlin had asked how to inspire early math thinking, and we talked a lot about being more playful and measuring with baking and playing board games and counting out around your house and those kind of things. And Michelle asked, do you have any suggestions for creating at-home math materials if someone can't afford the official Montessori materials? So I feel like we kind of covered that as well. And again, we'll put the link to mainly Montessori in the show notes so that we can do that. Morven asked if we could put all of the links in the show notes. We'll definitely do that as well.
Yes.
And go fish with modified rules to make number bonds. That's really cute. Yeah, I think that sounds great, Nisha. I think you're on the right track. Sounds really, really good. I can't believe we just talked 53 minutes about the mathematical mind, and we've got loads of other questions that came in about other things. But which direction do you want to go? Are you happy to just start going through the questions in the Google Sheet for the ones that came in earlier?
Sure, if there are, or if there is anybody still on the call that just wants to unmute themselves.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
If you have some questions to kind of clarify what we shared, you're more than welcome.
So did you want to unmute yourself, or was that an accident?
I think that might have been an accident.
So you can put up your hand here, but otherwise, there's so many. Actually, I really like this one, Jeanne-Marie. It says, Anu Palmer asked, how important is it for parents to introduce structured playtime for toddlers? I send my daughter to daycare with a Montessori approach, and they do plenty of activities there. But when she's home, I use the time to connect with her, read books, or simply dance, any activity that she wants to do. But we don't do any structured activities at home. I'm seeing many parents who do flashcards and right brain education activities and can't help but wonder if we're missing out. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer my question.
Please, you're doing the right thing. Connecting and living at home. That is family life. That is what they need. Nobody needs any flashcard as a toddler. Please, you're doing beautifully. She's getting a lot of stimulation in her environment at home. It's about cooking together, it's practical life, it's dancing, it's gardening, it's doing what feels good to the two of you, and no flashcards whatsoever.
Don't forget that, like, things like meal times and connecting, there's all the food preparation, but also the conversation, and that is going to be a really important ritual as your child gets older. So all of those kind of things are super important as well. And Anna asked a question that is fun as well, was while there's so much information about Montessori at birth and toddlers 0 to 3, there's surprisingly little about this as it evolves at home for Montessori 3 to 6. Would love to learn. And here, Jeanne-Marie and I actually did a workshop for 3 to 6-year-olds, the Montessori preschooler. Well, actually, I hosted it and Jeanne-Marie gave all this amazing information. So it's a 2-hour workshop. And then I think we stayed on for like another hour answering questions.
Yes.
So I'll put a link for that into the chat and with the thing as well. That's a good one. And then I love this one as well. Sarah asked, just for fun, are there any books you've been reading recently and would recommend? I love that question. What about you, Marie? What have you been reading?
I've been reading Zen Parenting that I am really enjoying. And I'm trying to remember her name. I don't have it with me, but she has a podcast with her husband called, I think, Zen Parenting. And it's just, it's contemporary and it's just very good. So I would recommend that one. Oh, and yes, I've received mine. I haven't read it yet. Raising Anti-Racist Children.
Rick Hawthorne's book, brilliant. And Goldie Muhammad, Cultivating Genius. I'm working through these books for my anti-bias education, which I highly recommend. But at bedtime, I don't read any books to do with work or children. And I just finished an amazing Murakami book called The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles. And it's 600 pages. It's taken me all year. And I was like going to give up halfway through, but it all just came to this beautiful ending in the last few chapters. So I don't know, Murakami is really fun as a wild, fantastical, beautiful poetry almost writing. And Jamuna has been reading The Artist's Way by J. Cameron.
Oh, that's very nice. Yes.
Jamuna, I said, See for Consent. Is that a book?
That is a book, a children's book that I have seen. Yes.
Sabine has been reading The Child is the Teacher. Ooh. Jamuna Inside Plane, Plane. I need to read some of these. Sabine is reading a Maria Montessori biography. And Jamuna's All Are Welcome. Yes, that's a beautiful book too. About body consent. Yes, great. Sarah's been reading Hunt, Gather, Parent. Beautiful. Yeah, look at all those. That's a great question. I love that.
Yes, that was nice. Thank you for putting that one in the chat, because then we get good book ideas. Wonderful.
Should we do one more? Do you want to pick one?
Do one more, or we can, yeah, let's do one more and then we'll wrap it up. Yes.
The one that jumps out at me is Stephanie's. How can I develop a system to rotate toys?
Observation.
Oh, Nisha, you've got to go. See you later. Thank you for both for your priceless knowledge. I've missed indulging in Montessori as COVID has pushed me back to corporate job for financial reasons. We'll be back at it as soon as the universe says it's the right time. Bye-bye.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you for joining us. So rotating toys. For me, there is no precise schedule. I am more on the on observation. So the toys that are no longer being touched, the toys that are maybe being mishandled or misused are taken out, and maybe we trade them in for something that is going to be the next step further in mastering a certain skill. But for me, it's not about, every Tuesday I need to clear the shelf and put in new toys, because that can be very disorienting. So it's really about observing, and there might be 3-4 weeks that it's the same thing because they're very engaged. What is important is always to be observing, into once they've mastered a certain skill, is to add a little additional challenge to that skill. Simone, I know you. How do you manage rotating in your environment?
So I have just now moved at the end of March into a new space, and I'd been in the old space for 6 years. So it was an opportunity to set up like my storage area exactly as I want it. And so it's just so fun to change things when I see, oh, that one's not being used so much, I'll put something fresh into that corner. And I just make very subtle changes, because if you change everything on their shelves, it's going to be a point of disorientation for them. And also there's things that they're working to master. So now I just notice I change maybe 1 or 2 of the things in the fine motor area, or just it really can be like, oh, that hasn't been played with, but I want to try it on a different tray and see if that makes it more interesting, or set it up in a different way. There was one puzzle that I had out and no one ever played with it, and then I tried it in lots of different variations, and then we finally cracked it, you know, like by laying it all out. All the pieces had to be laid out so they could really visually see it, and then it got used all the time. So I kind of see it as a bit of a challenge for myself. I must admit that when my kids were very small and there wasn't so much information about Montessori available for at home, I did just like on Tuesdays when my mum was looking after the kids, get in and do a bit of a, okay, these are the things I aren't playing with, I'm going to update it, because at least then I made the changes. And I know some people do that, like they make little notes on their notepad during the week of what's not working, but then at a fixed time make a change or something like that. So I think that you've got this. I think hopefully even just like having your toys organized will make rotation much more fun, by having like, okay, at least I'm just going to have one big crate that I pull out that's fine motor, and I'm going to have one big crate of art and craft things, so I can just take out, oh yeah, I'm going to get the punch this time and then put that back in, because my cupboard is not beautiful, but I know where to find things, and that's better than just having everything thrown in and shut the door and you just don't want to open it again.
Right.
And the last tip I would say on store rotation is like, if your child says, oh, I really want the such and such, which happens after they get to 3 years old and they remember the toys that are behind that door. Sometimes you start getting more and more things out. So you say, oh, that's no problem, we can get that out. What would you like to put away instead? And then they realize, okay, well, I'll really only change things occasionally, as opposed to you having to go into the cupboard all the time.
Yeah, I like that, of trading in, one thing comes in, one thing goes out. Perfect. Perfect. Well, this has been a wonderful show. I'm so glad that people were interested in knowing more about the mathematical mind, because it is fascinating. And we will send out the replay to everybody. We have put on our calendar that we will have the next show in October of 2022. And I think we are going to go back to basics, if I'm not mistaken. So that was the second vote of, and if you have suggestions, if you have topics that are of interest to you, please let us know. You can find us on Instagram or email us, and we would be happy to have a show dedicated to another topic. So thank you,
Sarah. Thanks. I also have to go. This is invaluable. Maya, I have to go. It was nice listening to both of you. Looking forward to the next show. These 2019 phone says thank you. And Jamuna also said thank you very much. The coffee shop was closing. Looking forward to a link about bilingualism. You're welcome. And Sabina, thank you as well. So yes. Thank you, Jean-Marie. It's always a pleasure to connect. I even see that your partner's on. Hello.
I know. He's in France. I'm in California. So I guess it's one way of connecting. All righty. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.